install the toilet and install the sink vanity and install the kitchen stuff, right? Like the garbage disposal, dishwasher, and the sink. So that was going to cost me about $1,000. So I said, well, fuck that. We can do that. I mean, Michael and I can do that, right? So we attempted to do it ourselves. And Michael was at work one day. He works one late day every week. And I had to... I was here by myself and I was trying to finish it before inspection. And so I tried to do it on my own. And so I cut open one of the pipes like a fucking moron without turning the fucking water off and forgetting to do that. And so when I did it, the water started gushing out towards me like a fucking, I don't know, geyser, okay, out of the goddamn wall, under the sink, shooting across the bathroom all the way over to the toilet on the other side of the room, and soaking the whole entire floor in the bathroom. And between the bathroom and her bedroom, I was going to put a pocket door, but I hadn't installed that yet, so it was just wide open. And so it went right in from the bathroom, right into her bedroom on the brand new hardwood floors. And it was going everywhere, and I didn't know where the fuck to turn the water off. I didn't know. I knew it was somewhere in the front, I thought. So I ran out to the front, and I was like, oh my God, I was freaking out. I ran out to the front, and I turned the water off, I thought, at one of the things in the ground, and I turned this little knob thing in the ground. Went back in there, it was still going. Went back out there, went to this other one, and found it, turned it off. Anyway, by the time I got back in there, it was like a fucking lake, okay? It was a lake. And so I was fucking, crazy livid. So I was like almost crying. I was like, oh my God. So anyway, I was just so devastated. And so while I was doing all this, I tried to call Michael to see where the turnoff thing was. And so I was using my iPhone, and while I was doing that, I was like taking this big bucket I had and trying to guide the water into the bucket so it wouldn't go all over the floor, and then throwing the bucket of water into the shower. Excuse me. And instead, when I did that one time, my iPhone fell into the bucket of water and was drowned in the water for about 5 seconds, pulled it out, put it aside, of course, and then continued to deal with the water issue. So it took me forever, like an hour or whatever, to clean up everything. And the floor, of course, was soaked in the hardwoods in her bedroom, and they were like slightly warped. And I mean, it was just a horrible mess. And I was so devastated because I wanted everything to be perfect for her when she moved in. And so what was I going to say? Oh, and so after all that happened, whatever, I ended up hiring a plumber anyway to do it, finish everything, because obviously I was too stupid to turn the water off in the first place. And I didn't have him do everything, but I had to do the major stuff like the plumbing, like, pipes and shit. And so he came a couple days later, and this is the story about this guy. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But so before I get to that, though, my iPhone was completely ruined. It would turn on, but it wouldn't get a signal. Like, you couldn't get a cell signal or anything like that. It was completely fucking ruined. And so I was like, fuck. So that was down the drain. It was an iPhone 5. And so I immediately went and ordered an iPhone 5S because that was what was available. And it came today in the mail. So I went like for 4 or 5 days without a phone. It is fucking amazing how much we depend on our cell phones today. Okay. I mean, I know when I was a kid, not a kid, like a teenager, I had a cell phone, and it was a luxury, and very few people had them. I was like 19. I wanted to have a cell phone because it was convenient, so I had one. And it was PrimeCo, which isn't even around anymore. But I had a cell phone, and I know it was like a big novelty then. And nowadays, it's ubiquitous, and everybody has a fucking cell phone. You live on your cell phone. It's not only a cell phone these days, it's a smartphone, it's a computer, it's a calendar, it's email, it's everything. It's the internet. And so I had several meetings this past week with clients, and I didn't have my cell phone with me. It was just like fucking crazy. So it's really amazing how much you depend on a cell phone when you don't have one, and how much you fucking miss it. And I had my iPad, but carrying that big ass thing around, to do things you do with a phone was very difficult. So you can't make phone calls on it. Well, I actually did make a few phone calls on it using my Google Voice numbers and some other things. So. Oh, yeah, and I told David about it when it happened, and he's reminding me that I did stick my phone in rice, and some arborio rice that I had, and a container of it for like a day. And they say to do that if your phone gets wet, and it'll suck the water out. Did that, but it did not work. So anyway, the good news is I got a reduced rate on my phone. I didn't have to pay the full like $699 or $700 cost for the new iPhone because they said I qualified for a partial discounted rate, even though my contract wasn't up yet for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I did. So I had to pay like $490 or something for it, the phone. And above and beyond that, I found these sites where you can sell your iPhone online, even damaged. And my damaged one came up to be about $130. And I was going to send it in there until today. I thought maybe I could get more money on eBay. And so I put it on eBay and told everybody what happened, what was wrong with the phone, and it sold in like 5 minutes for $199. So I essentially paid for half my phone by selling my old phone that's damaged, which they're aware of, for someone who thinks they can fix it. So I'm so happy. So I'm glad that I got some money out of that. So anyway, what was the next thing I was going to say? Fuck. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, so yeah, that's the thing about the iPhone thing. So anywho, back to the story about the plumber. I was going to tell you, this is the weirdest thing. Okay. This plumber comes and he's a real nice guy, older, probably like late 50s, right? And he's a plumber and an electrician, okay, which is odd, but he's both. And so he comes in and he does all the plumbing, whatever, the first day, and then he starts doing that. It takes him 3 days, by the way, to do everything. All he had to do was to hook up actually, beyond that, we hooked up the garbage disposal. We hooked up the pipes and everything under the sinks. We just didn't put anything in the wall, the connections, So all he had to do was make the connections, we thought. And instead, he actually ran into some issues he had of his own. Anyway, so it took him 3 days to do something it should have taken him a day to do. But he did a really great job. He did an amazingly good job, right? Okay, so this whole time he's talking to us, as we're working through the addition and stuff, getting it ready for my mother. And he's telling us about his life and everything else. So he tells us that he does this for fun. He does his job with plumbing and handyman stuff, whatever, electrical, whatever, for fun. He likes doing it. That's why he does it, not for the money, he says. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't think much about it, right? And then, and he talks a lot. Okay, he talks a lot. Have you ever gotten stuck in a conversation with someone who won't shut the fuck up? Okay, that's what this guy was like. He was a nice guy, but when he started talking to you, when he caught your eye, you don't want to look at him in the eye because you don't want to catch him in a conversation, He would sit there, literally at one point in the last night when I was already exhausted, my mom was moving in last night, he was finishing up the electrical stuff. And literally, he was standing there at one of the light switches fixing it, and he was turned around and started talking to me about his life and everything. And I was standing there for 35 minutes. And the only reason he stopped talking is my mom finally came in, and so I was like, oh my God, shut the fuck up in my head. But he wouldn't stop talking. And so, it's not like I wasn't interested necessarily, but I was busy, right? And so he kept talking and talking and talking. Anyway, I'm getting to the point here in a minute. So he tells us, my mom's there, whatever, early in the day. She'd been there before that point. But anyway, she'd been there early in the day. And when she first came in, when the movers were coming in to move her stuff in to the addition. And I call it a guest house. But anyway, and she came in and was talking. And he on the third day, he brings this little packet of information to me. And in it is about 10 pages. And double-sided, and there are all these photographs of this house. And I've got it here. Hold on. Excuse me. And this is what it says on it. Well, first of all, he says, hey, aren't you, you're not just an architect, but you're also a realtor, right? Because he said, Michael was telling me you're also a realtor. I was like, yes, I am. And he said, oh, great, because he said, I have a house that I think I'd like you to list for me. I said, okay, sure, I'd be happy to list your house, whatever. And I'm thinking, it's probably some, rinky-dink house, whatever, but I don't care. And so I don't even do real estate for the money. I just do it because I like real estate. But anyway, so he hands me this little packet I have in my hand right now. And it has all these pictures, this mansion. It's this huge house. And on it says his name, and it says sales price $3.2 million. Owner financing available. I'm like, wait. I said, this is your house? He's like, yeah. I said, so this mansion is your house? He's like, yeah, this is my house. We built it about 12 years ago. I'm like, okay. And I'm like thinking something does not compute to me. I'm like, why is this person who owns a $3.2 million house working as a handyman? And why it doesn't make sense to me. And I was thinking that in my head, but I was like, okay. And so I was taking him at face value, whatever. And the other thing I didn't mention earlier is, how most handymen and people who are in like a blue collar job, they sound blue collar. There's nothing wrong with blue collar. My mother was a blue collar worker, and my dad's is a blue collar worker, and so it's nothing wrong with it. But do I sound like a blue collar worker to you? No, because I'm not. I wasn't raised to be one. I was educated, blah blah blah. So I don't have to be a blue collar worker. So blue collar workers typically sound more blue collar, meaning they have more what's the word? More regional dialectal tones to their voices or whatever, and they're going to sound a little more country. Down here in Texas, they're going to sound more like this, how are you? I'll get that fixed up for you, that kind of thing. So they're going to sound like that here. That's how most blue collar workers sound here. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that's how most of them sound. And whereas a person who is a white collar worker typically sounds more like I do. Okay, so this guy he sounded very white collar. And I noticed this when I first talked to him and met him, and he came in as a plumber, right? And the plumber electrician. I'm like, okay. And I thought he sounded really educated, whatever. So when he told me he had a $3.2 million house, I didn't exactly, I was like, okay, I said, maybe he's telling me the truth, because I could tell he didn't sound like a, plumber or whatever. So he tells me this whole story about how he sold all this stock or whatever. He used to work for AT&T as an engineer, and he sold his stock. They bought his stock out years back, whatever. And then he wrote all these programs for all these different companies. I can't remember what companies. He named all these big companies, and Nokia being one of them. Not Nokia, Nortel being one of them or whatever. And so I was like, okay, great, And so that's how he made his money. And so, okay, fine. So I'm like, fine, buying whatever. I said, sure. He wants me to sell him this house for him. Sure, fine, no problem. Well, so if I were to sell this house for him, I would make, out of a $3.2 million house, I'd make about $150,000 in commission, okay? So it's not exactly just something I would turn my nose up at, right? The thing is, it's in Fort Worth and not in Dallas, which is like 40 minutes away. But anyway, it would be worth it, right? Okay, so we go on about the day. He finishes. He does a great job. Ask him how much he wants me to pay him. I said, how much do I owe you? He said, well, how much do you think it was worth? I go, I don't know. I said, just tell me how much to pay you, and I'll pay you, because I don't want to haggle. And so I was like, just tell me what I owe you, basically. And he's like, okay. And so, well, these are my expenses. He had to pull out this little notebook, and he shows me what his expenses were, and his gas, and this parts he had to buy, and everything else. And he adds it all up, and he says, this is what I spent in parts and everything else. It was like $200. Okay. I was like, okay. And I said, so how much do you want above and beyond the $200? And he said, you can decide that. And I was like, look, just how much you want to be paid. So we go back and forth about it. Finally, he tells me a number, and it's like, fine, I'll pay you that. So I pay him. I go get him my check, and I pay him whatever. And he leaves. Okay. So then today I was real tired because I lost it last night and didn't think about it till today. Today I was looking at this packet again, just because it's sitting on my desk, right? And the pictures of the house are very blurred. They're very blurry. They're not like their first. I didn't notice this yesterday. And all the other pictures of the interior of the house are all like perfect, pristine pictures, like he pulled them off the internet or something, right? And they don't all match up with his house. Their pictures are like all professional pictures. They're not pictures you would go in and take of your house, right? But he told me he tried to sell this house before, and he hasn't a current realtor. And so I figured, well, maybe they had a professional take these pictures. It's possible. But then I'm looking at the pictures closer, and they don't make sense. So I started looking him up on the MLS, because he said his house was currently listed. Look it up on the MLS. Oh, by the way, and this does not show the address of the house at all. There's no address of the house. It's just the pictures of the house and information about the house, like rooms and stuff like that. And so I didn't know how to look it up, right? Because I couldn't find the address. So what I did is I went and looked at all the $3.2 million houses, or houses in that range anyway, in Fort Worth for sale right now on the MLS, or that had sold recently or been on the market recently. This house is not anywhere in any of those houses, okay? There's lots of houses there, big houses, whatever, but none of them are these photographs. And then I went to the Fort Worth Appraisal District thing to look that up, to see if he was telling the truth, and look up his name. And I found a house with his name on it, right? And this is public information. Found the house with his name on it, and his name was next to a house that was like a $120,000 house, a very small, house or whatever for Dallas standards, or in terms of price, I mean. So I was like, okay, interesting. Maybe it's in his kid's name. So I kept looking. And there is literally no house that's worth $3.2 million in Fort Worth that's on the tax